After that comeback win over Maryland, there's no doubt Washington is trending up in the Big Ten.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you don't miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the channel out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming at all you everydayers out there today. I want to talk a little bit about the injuries to John Mills, Carver Willis, Tacario Davis, if they might catch up to Washington this year, because there's a lot to be excited about with this team. Even as we look ahead to a short week against Rutgers, I want to talk a little bit about that. And if Washington can retain the momentum that we've seen this team gain after just such an impressive second half, and especially in that fourth quarter against Maryland, that propelled them to a 24-20 victory. And that brings us to our main point today, is Washington is a team that you need to be buying stock in the Big Ten right now. This is something that we've been talking about all spring, all summer on this show. And as we look at this team, Washington, there's so many things to be excited about with this team, especially on the offense, where you've got the big three: Demond Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston. Let's talk about Jonah Coleman real quick here for 1 second, because right now we've seen Demond Williams just play stellar football, but Jonah Coleman is and always will be the engine that has made this team go. Where coming into this game, Washington had attempted the fewest passes in the Big Ten, which is 98. And obviously, numbers are a little bit different now with Demond Williams dropping back and throwing 40, 41 passes in this game. But Jonah Coleman has been one of, if not the best skill player in the nation this season. He's number 6 in the country right now with 697 yards from scrimmage, while his 11 total touchdowns lead the country. This is a guy who's just been out of this world. And when you look ahead, yeah, you're going to face some strong and very well-coached defenses when you look at Rutgers, Michigan, Illinois being the next 3 teams on Washington's schedule. But when you have a guy like that you can lean on, obviously you hope the offensive line stays healthy. Those are things that can continue to move the chains. And when you're not in whatever kind of weird funk that this offense was in the first half, those are things that can just do a really good job to just keep the momentum, keep things on a level pace. When, that was one of the concerns I saw from some everydayers after the Maryland game, was you didn't really see a whole lot of Jonah early on. We know he got a little bit dinged up early in that game as well, so that probably played into this a little bit. It didn't seem like it was anything too major, since he was able to come back and finish the game and look really solid. But as you look at just what kind of player he is, he's someone who doesn't need a lot of room to operate, and he's just been able to break tackles and do so much in these tight spaces, and has just always been so good at picking up yards after contact that even if this offensive line does break down a little bit with some of these injuries, he is a guy that you can lean on. And we saw it last season behind a subpar offensive line. He was still able to run for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. And now that he's already at that 10 touchdown mark, I don't want to say it leaves a lot to be desired. It's just really interesting to just kind of look ahead and see what Jonah can be as the season carries on. And that just kind of brings us to this offense as a whole. We've seen this Demond Williams and Denzel Boston connection be just crucial to this offense early on in the season. And it's come through at several different points. You look at what they looked like in the Apple Cup. You look at what the second half looked like against Maryland. And as this team continued to just find itself in this game, you saw the comeback where Demond really did struggle early on in that game. There were some easy throws that he missed, some other ones that he just wasn't seeing as the pressure did start to get to him. And as this game moved on, we saw Denzel continue to get open. He's so good at just creating space with his body, with his long arms, and with his speed and athleticism as well. He's not just a one-trick pony. There's a reason that he's projected to go in the first round of the NFL draft. He is that kind of high-caliber receiver. And he's just such an effective security blanket for a guy like Demond Williams. And it goes so far beyond him, though, at the same point in time, because you look at what this offense has done so far. They're number 6 in the Big Ten, averaging 446.4 yards per game, and number 5 in points per game at 39.4. So this is an offense that has been operating at a really, really high level. And you knew things were going to get tougher in Big Ten play, but you just overcame a massive challenge on the road at Maryland after a 4.5-hour flight to go down 20-0 and find a way to come back and win that game. Yeah, there were a lot of issues and a lot of things that need to be sorted out, but you still can take your hat off to the coaching staff and say you were able to overcome a 20-point deficit in a little bit over a quarter. You scored 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter alone, obviously 24 unanswered to win that game. But those are things that cannot go unnoticed. Those are things that you need to make sure, no matter how you feel about the first 2.5, 3 quarters, you can give credit to this coaching staff and say, you found a way to figure it out. You changed some things up on the defensive side of the ball, and the offense was able to wake up and lock in and get into a rhythm after the defense was able to get a couple stops at the same point in time. And those things are really crucial. And it's one of the reasons that you need to keep buying stock in Washington as this trending team in the Big Ten, because this coaching staff is one of the best in the conference. There are times where Jedd Fisch doesn't seem to be able to get out of his own way as a play caller, but as he continues to learn and figure some of these things out and hopefully continue to adjust them as the season goes along with Demond Williams at the helm, now that he might realize, okay, this works a little bit better than that. I can't call this in this situation. I need to get Demond roll out of the pocket more. Whatever some of these things might be, if he can continue to adjust those things, we saw Ryan Walters do a really good job without 3 starters hold Ohio State to 24 points. I know it's not a moral victory sort of thing, but the fact that you were able to do that against one of the best teams not one of the best team in the country right now with that kind of skill talent on the outside and that level of offensive line talent, that is still something that you can tip your cap to and say, moving forward, this is somebody that you know you can rely on. And I look down the line. I think Athan Kaliakmanis at Rutgers is going to be a very interesting test for this defense. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on, but I still think that you look around and there aren't a lot of just super high-powered, high-flying offenses on your schedule moving forward. I think Michigan is okay. I think that's a very gettable game. I think Illinois coming into Husky Stadium is also a very gettable game. And then you look at the rest of the schedule. Purdue, UCLA, obviously shout out to them for that big win over Penn State, Wisconsin. Those are all very gettable games. I think Oregon, if you're able to get healthy, that could be a real battle as well. There is no reason that you shouldn't be buying stock in Washington right now. I'm not going to go so far as to say I think this team can make the college football playoff right now, because you need some much better injury luck for sure. And you also need just some bounces to continue to fall your way. But there are so many things that when you just look around this roster, you can say the talent is there on both sides of the ball, where Paki Finau stepping in for John Mills, I'm going to get to him more later on as well. He did a tremendous job. He was really, really impressive. Hopefully you get Carver Willis back here in a week or two. This offensive line has done its job. It has held up, especially against what is a very, very good Maryland pass rush. And yeah, you got a little bit lucky where I think that was 100% a good call on Sidney Stewart, the targeting foul there. You got a little bit lucky that came when it did, and you didn't have to deal with one of the rising stars on the edge in the Big Ten, especially without your starting left tackle in this game. But still, that's just kind of the way that it's starting to work. And no matter who's been at left guard, John Mills or Paki Finau, both those guys are building blocks for this Washington program moving forward. You look around the defense, you're starting to see building blocks at all 3 levels come to fruition, where you look along the defensive line, Jacob Lane continues to impress. He's been so solid this year. Along the interior, Linus Davis is really solid. Javon Parker is a guy I want to talk about more later. He's probably going to be back pretty soon. At linebacker, Zajus Randy-Saleh continues to get closer, and you look at what Jacob Manu is giving you in the short term and what Devin Bryant and X-Ray Alexander have been able to do in run support to help you fill in some of these gaps is great. You look at the secondary, Dylan Robinson has been absolutely tremendous filling in for Tacario Davis, and you love to see that. And then you look at safety, Alex McLaughlin, Rylan Dillard-Allen, that is the future back there on the back end of the defense. And with the way Ryan Walters utilizes safeties in this defense, those guys both look like future all Big Ten caliber players. There are so many things to be excited about. And just to make sure I touch on every position here, I didn't even mention tight end and Decker DeGraff, who had one of the best games of his young career at catching the ball in Maryland on Saturday. Every single position on this team has somebody who you can invest in and say, that guy looks like a future NFL caliber player, a future all-conference caliber player, because there is that level of talent on this team. Don't forget that Decker DeGraff was a freshman All-American last season. And I think that that's something that's really exciting, because if you are, my record prediction for this team was 9-3. If you can get to 8-4, 9-3, maybe you get lucky and you can get to 10-2. There are so many things that you can look at for the short and long-term future of this Washington program and say they are a massive riser in the Big Ten. And in order to just continue with that status, you need to really show up on a short week against Rutgers. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and correct your form, making every rep safer and smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. So as we look ahead to Rutgers, I don't really want to get too much into the fact that it's insanely ridiculous that Washington has to play 5 teams coming off a bye this season, this one being the third. And, the Big Ten looked at it, was just kind of like, oh, yeah, that's what happened. It's insane. It's ridiculous, but you can't do anything about it. You can't change it. You just hope the conference acknowledges this and will change things in the future, because it's absolutely wild to see this. This is Washington's 3rd straight opponent coming off a bye. And you look at this game, and I think it comes down to a couple of things where the health of Washington is very important. But as we look at the other side of that, since we don't know too much about that right now, I'm sure we'll find out a little bit more from Jedd Fisch during his Monday press conference. But I look at this game, and I think it comes down to 2 things in particular. One is slowing down Rutgers quarterback Athan Kaliakmanis, who did a really good job against the Huskies last season. He didn't necessarily look like a world beater, but he has absolutely taken a step forward this year. If you listen to some people in NFL draft circles, shout out to my buddy Connor Rogers over at the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, he's been really impressive, and his name is starting to gain a lot of traction. He's number 3 in the Big Ten right now with 1,399 passing yards. He's got a 9-2 touchdown to interception ratio, and he's completing 67.3% of his passes. He's been really, really efficient throughout the entire season. And he's somebody who I think Washington can do a really good job, especially if Tacario Davis is able to return. I think that Washington can do a good job on the outside against some of these Rutgers receivers. And then the question is going to be, can you slow down Antwan Raymond? Because he's been awesome this season. He's been quietly one of the best backs in the Big Ten. He's got 471 rushing yards through Rutgers' first 5 games and 9 touchdowns. And this is one of those things where you look at how that game last year in Piscataway went with Kyle Monungai and Samuel Brown just really controlling that game. I think that this is something where I'm optimistic about Washington's future, because the Huskies have been really good on the ground so far this season. It hasn't necessarily shown because, you've struggled a little bit against Ohio State, and teams have certainly taken advantage of the lack of Tacario Davis. And we've just seen a lot more off coverage and a lot of just different coverages that have allowed teams to move the ball against the Huskies, who are number 8 right now in yards per game allowed on the defensive side in the Big Ten at 283.6. But I think Washington's defense has all the pieces necessary to slow down this Rutgers attack, which has been really solid to start the year. And I think that a lot of this certainly does come down to health. And I think one thing that I'm really optimistic about, because I want to talk about the offensive line a little bit later on, is the return of not just Tacario Davis, which does seem to be inching closer. I know that I've been the proponent that he was probably going to play a couple of weeks ago, and I was 100% wrong about that. But I feel like this might be the week that you can bring him back for, where, yeah, it's a short week. But seeing him make the trip to Rutgers is certainly a good sign. Seeing him suit up and work out before the game is also a good sign. I know Pete Thamel reported him as out, but the fact that Washington listed him as questionable and continues to push him a little bit farther, I think the medical team right now has the final say, where Jedd Fisch said that he's dealing with a rib injury, and the fact that he's probably not able to tackle and fully protect himself is the biggest issue right now in terms of overcoming that, where it's one of those things where even after the injury happened, Jedd said that, even after he's able to suit up, he's just going to be day to day for a while in terms of how that feels and what the comfortability level is there. So I'm really interested to see if he's able to make it back for this game, because this is the kind of game where you're really going to need a guy like that, where when you go back and look at what Kaliakmanis did in that game last season, he made a couple of really nice tight window throws. I know the one that, really is going to stand out to some people is following the penalty on Vincent Holmes that negated the blocked field goal and turned into a touchdown on the very next play. play is a perfect example of that. But as I look forward and I look at this matchup, I think with or without Tacario Davis, Washington has the personnel on the outside to be able to just force Kaliakmanis to continue to make throws like that to beat you. Where I think that we really saw Ryan Walters do some nice things in the second half of this game against Maryland, where he was playing so much off coverage and just kind of letting Malik Washington and this Maryland offense just eat up everything underneath, saying, okay, 4, 5, 6 yards. Yeah, okay, you can do that. We're going to keep tackling you. And that's what turned into 2 16-play drives. That's what turned into a 20-0 deficit at a certain point. And seeing him mix that up was really great because you saw more aggressiveness, more coming downhill, good tackling. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've seen just different from this UW team compared to not even just 2024, but you go back 4, 5, 6 years and just some of the struggles we've seen on the defensive side as of late, where even in 2021, just defending the run was absolutely atrocious under Jimmy Lake. I know I don't need to remind all the everydayers of that, but it's one of those things where Washington has done such a much better job of tackling. I feel like you can play a little bit closer. You can press up a little bit more on these guys, especially with Tacario Davis back in the fold, and commit more bodies to the box, commit more bodies against the run. I don't necessarily know what some of these different pressures are going to look like at this point in time against a senior quarterback who has certainly seen a lot of these things before in his career, but I have a lot of faith in Ryan Walters. And it's not just Tacario Davis potentially returning. I feel like this might be the game where we see Javon Parker come back as well. He was another guy who was listed as questionable. Going into the Rutgers game, obviously we didn't see him going into the Maryland game, obviously we didn't see him on the field in that contest. But he's one of those guys where, it would be a great story after you have the unfortunate Achilles injury on their field to a little bit over a year later make your return against that same team. I think that's really great because especially when you look at what Javon was doing in that game, it was clicking, man. It was so exciting to see him finally put it all together. And to see what Washington's coaching staff has done with him over the offseason is something I've been really intrigued by personally, because when we were, sitting in the stands for spring ball or fall practice when they were in the stadium, he was one of those guys who, when one of the things that this strength and conditioning staff has Washington do for the guys who can't practice is they have them walk the stairs inside Husky Stadium. And you could tell that Javon is significantly bigger. Where you walk by him, it's, oh yeah, that guy's gained 15, 20 something pounds. And I don't know if they want to necessarily just play him at nose tackle and have him rotate in with Samote Pepa, with Logan Sagapolu, because he's not just a nose tackle. He's athletic enough to play the 3 tech, to play the 5 tech, and do a whole bunch of different things for you on the interior of the defensive line. And I think adding this extra weight, and for somebody who, if you ask anybody in that defensive line room, they will immediately point to him as probably the strongest player on the entire team, is really exciting, where you look at continuing to add a little bit more to this run defense and add more to this interior just rotation on the defensive line, where we already see 6, 7, 8 bodies. What's one more going to do outside of just keep everybody fresh and maybe give you a little bit more juice in the pass rush as well? Because we've seen Javon be one of those guys that truly can collapse the pocket from the interior. If he even takes 10 to 15 snaps in this game, I feel like that would be a really, really positive sign for Washington. And as I just continue to look at what this matchup can bring, Greg Schiano does a tremendous job coaching defense, but we saw Jedd Fisch's team, especially, considering what that offensive line was last year, considering some of the different struggles that this team had last year down in the red zone. They moved the ball. They put up over 500 yards on this Rutgers team last year. And yeah, the personnel is a little bit different, but the scheme remains the same on both sides of the ball with Schiano's defense and Jedd's offense. And I think that this is something where now with DeMond Williams at the helm, there are some different ways you can take advantage of this. And I think with Washington doing a much better job of scoring touchdowns down in the red zone, this could be a very different outcome. And I think the bye week factor certainly still will play into this, but just like Washington had to do last year, Rutgers still has to take the cross-country flight. There are a lot of just these little aspects of the game I think certainly could play into this. And being at home for this short week game now this time is something that I think might really benefit Washington in the long run. And again, you really hope that just some of these injured guys can come back. And with that being said, we've got to talk about John Mills in this offensive line, because there's a lot to like about this Washington team. But the question is, are the injuries going to catch up to them? And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Square, because this episode is brought to you by Square and your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that make the neighborhood the neighborhood. There are places that become an extension of home, whether it's the sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town for game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. And when we show up as a community, it can mean big business for local business owners because money spent in the neighborhood stays in the neighborhood. And you can take this ad as an excuse to go support your favorite local spot and have yourself a day in the neighborhood, which was one of my favorite things to do. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockdowncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live line during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving on the stats just like me, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. So when we talk about injuries, unfortunately, we have to start with the most recent one, and that was John Mills, who went down in the third quarter in Washington's comeback win over Maryland. We haven't received an update on his status just yet. Jedd Fisch was asked about him after the game, and he said, yeah, I'm not really sure where we are on him, but he was unfortunately spotted in a walking boot. He had some crutches with him. It looked like he was moving around a little bit. If you watched our good buddy Christian Capel's video, celebration video from the field over on Montlake's YouTube page, it looked like John Mills didn't necessarily need the crutches to get around the entire time, which might be a good sign, but it's still one of those things where it might put him out for a couple of weeks. I feel like we'll hear more about that in the coming days, especially leading up to a short week game. It's a little unfortunate, but the reason I want to start here is not just because, obviously the theme of the segment here being, will injuries catch up to Washington, is this is the one where we got so many questions about this through the spring, through the summer, through the fall, is who's going to win out? Is it going to be John Mills or is it going to be Paaki Finau? And it's one of those things where we've been saying for a long time that both of these guys are a big part of Washington's plans, and it's why we saw them still divvy up snaps as the weeks went on through fall camp and even through the first 3-4 games. There are so many different things that you can point to with Paaki saying that guy is a building block, whether it be at guard or at tackle. He is someone that this coaching staff wants around. He's got 4 years of eligibility, this obviously including this one. So there's still a lot of room for him to grow and mature. And it's not necessarily the biggest deal if he doesn't start and play every snap, every game this season. And I think this is one of the things that we're kind of waiting for, as Jedd Fisch kind of alluded to after the game, saying it's a violent position. There are going to be injuries, unfortunately, along the offensive line. And while Max McCree stepped in a tackle after Carver Willis went down, who I'll get to here in a second, I think that with John and Paaki being in such a tight battle, it kind of just goes back to what the theme of what I know Lars had been saying as well about Paaki and John was throughout the spring and the summer, is they want to find a way to play both these guys. And I think that as the weeks go on, I don't know, obviously you can't ever plan for an injury like this, but I feel like there was going to be a point where we saw Paaki just kind of assume a starting spot on the offensive line at one position or another. And I think that we still might see that if John Mills is able to not miss a lot of time. Hopefully he doesn't miss any. But if he does, this is one of those things where if Paaki continues to play well, because he played very, very well in this game against Maryland, he didn't allow a lot of pressure. I think that they're going to find a way to continue to work him into the lineup. And then as we look ahead to 2026, John Mills and Paaki Finau are probably written in pen as starters right now for this coaching staff. And it does speak a lot to the improved depth on the offensive line, the improved talent that this group has as well. There are a lot of things to be excited about up front. And I think this offensive line, especially as we get into 2026, could wind up being one of the better groups in the conference. I don't think it's all the way there just yet, but there are a lot of promising signs from this group saying, okay, you look a year, you look 2 years down the line, all these guys that have a whole bunch of eligibility remaining, it all looks like there's going to be a role for them in one way or another. And I'm just excited about where that group is going to be. And let's just kick this conversation out to left tackle with Carver Willis. It feels like we saw him at the game against Maryland. He was wearing a big brace on his leg, but the fact that he made the trip seems to be a very, very good sign for his future. I don't know if it's going to be this week against Rutgers or next week against Michigan that he might come back, but it doesn't feel like he's going to be out a super long time either, which again is a very good sign because I look at Maximus McCree and I think there's still some things for him to continue improving on. I think that Maryland just looked at this game and said, we are going to send pressure at that guy. We know that he's the most untested member of this line. We are going to make him make quick decisions and overwhelm him. And especially when Sidney Stewart was still on the field, it certainly worked a lot in the first half. And that's something that you hope and you're able to go back to the tape and Jedd Fisch and Michael Switzer and Mike Brewster and this entire Washington coaching staff can point to and say, okay, this is how we want you to pick this up. This is how we want you to pick that up. And it was great to see him perform adequately a little bit in 2024 as well. But it was very clear that after spending so much time away from the game of football, which is not his fault in any way, shape, or form. If you want to go read about that story, our guy Lars Hansen did a tremendous job writing about it over on Huskies Wire. You can go check it out there. I think that this is the kind of guy where you have to have a little bit of patience with him. But at the same point, I look at Carver and he's someone who's just been so sturdy this season. You want to make sure you get him back as soon as possible because I think John Mills might be the long-term answer for this coaching staff at left tackle. But right now, when you have a guy who's played a little bit more, instead of throwing John into the fire and making him start there against Maryland, having someone who has some Big Ten experience at left tackle is really important. And as the weeks go on, if Carver is forced to miss more time, I certainly think that we're going to see Max get better and better at the position as he continues to get reps. But I'm certainly going to have my concerns because I feel like we're going to see, like I was saying earlier, some really talented, well-coached defenses. When you look at Rutgers, Maryland, Illinois, those are teams, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that know how to exploit your weaknesses. And when you look at this offensive line right now, I would say that Max, because he wasn't one of the guys that came into the year as a starter, is someone that all of these coaching staffs are going to point to and say, whenever we send pressure, whenever we want to just run a stunt or different things like that, that's where we are going to send it. We are going to send it at left tackle and make him and Paki Finau or John Mills or whoever it is continue to pick those up and communicate and make life hard on them. Because when we saw Jonah Coleman or Adam Muhammad stay in for pass protection, that was the side that we saw them help and chip to a decent amount of the time. So I don't know if we're going to see a little bit more, two tight end sets and you want to take a receiver off the field, whether it be Desmond Roebuck, who looked awesome, Raiden Feinsbright had a nice day, and leave Quentin Moore on that side to block and help out. But there are a lot of different things that Washington can do to combat the injury to Carver Willis, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the best way for Jedd Fisch to run his offense and keep it as explosive as possible is by leaving an extra tight end on the field, especially someone who is a blocking first sort of guy. I know Quentin Moore can do more than hold his own at the position, but I think that especially when we look at how Washington continued to attack against Maryland, that's not the plan that Jedd wants to go with. So I'm curious to see how that might continue to shape up in the coming weeks. And let's jump over to the defensive side here for a few minutes before we get out of here, because I know I just spent some time on him a minute ago, but obviously it's still critical to get Tacario Davis back as soon as possible because he just allows you so much freedom in the secondary. And like I said earlier, I think Dylan Robinson has been a tremendous asset on defense so far this season. And it was always a matter of when, not if, he broke out and became one of the bigger names on this defense. I still feel like you're going to have to be patient and wait until 2026 to see him assume this role as a full-time starter. I know I'm not breaking any news there or anything, but I look at this team and I look at what Dylan Robinson has done and I say, this kid's going to be a weapon. He's going to be a tremendous force for Ryan Walters on the outside for years to come as he continues to learn technique. I know we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that this is the first time he is just fully committed to playing cornerback after playing on both sides of the ball at Bonita High School down in California throughout his high school career. So this is one of those things where there's still a lot to be desired, but watching him right now and saying, this is the floor, this is the baseline for you, is such an exciting thought because he continues to get better week in and week out. And you go and you watch the All-22 against Ohio State. He does a tremendous job not backing down from a really tough challenge and staying physical with Jeremiah Smith, with Carnell Tate, and not allowing big explosive plays. We've seen him create turnovers as well. We saw it at Washington State. We saw him be really good in run support. At 6'3", 205, he can come downhill and he can hit and he can fill these gaps in run support. It's so much fun to watch, but you obviously still want your starter back. And I think that you can survive with Dylan Robinson on the field, but I don't think this coaching staff wants to, and nor should they. When you have someone who has the ceiling of arguably the best corner in the country in Tacario Davis, you want to make sure that that guy is on the field as early and often as possible. And obviously this injury has been unfortunate. He's now missed over a month in terms of the calendar from when the injury happened. And I see some people out there that are saying, oh, or is this disappointment? Is this, is this that? It's just bad luck. And I don't think that you can really dump too much on the kid and saying, oh, you need to get him back on the field. Because I know I mentioned this a week or two ago. I watched him, unfortunately, just get the news that he wasn't going to be able to play after the Ohio State warmups that he went through early on in that game. And it was so clear that moments like that is what brought him to Washington, what brought him back to college for his senior season. And he wanted to be on the field so bad, like there were tears in his eyes as he walked off the field. He threw a t-shirt over his head and just didn't want to look up at the crowd and see what he was going to wind up missing in that game. And he's someone who just brings so much to this defense. You look at the chemistry that he has at the Ephesians Prize Sock throughout spring practice, throughout fall camp. He was a guy that just brought so much energy to this defense and just brings so much life because he just gives you extra confidence knowing, okay, I've got a guy on the outside. And now too, because Ephesians Prize Sock has really taken a step forward this year as well. I've got two guys on the outside who I know are going to do their jobs. And I know are going to be just lockdown corners because they've seen so much. They've played so much football in their careers. And again, it's not to knock Dylan Robinson. He's going to be a really tremendous player for this Washington defense down the line. But when you have an all-American caliber talent on the outside, you want to make sure that guy is back as quickly as possible. And one of the reasons that I look at this Rutgers matchup and say, this is a perfect week to get him back because you can really challenge Athan Kaliakmanis with a guy like Tacario Davis in these press man coverages because Rutgers is going to try to beat you quick. That's what these last couple of weeks have been for Washington. It's we're going to give up everything underneath and we're going to try to let you beat us here and try to let you beat us there. And I think we're going to see that plan of attack change from Ryan Walters because we saw it change late in the game against Maryland and they couldn't adjust. They couldn't find different ways to beat you, where I know they had a drop down field late on that final drive, but this Maryland offense couldn't find a way to beat you. And I think that in terms of high end potential and what that team has been able to do so far this year, I think it's a little bit better than what Rutgers is bringing to the table. I think both units are very, very solid, but I think that if you can get Tacario Davis back for this game, we might see this Washington defense click and we might see it really take a step forward because Jacob Manu at linebacker has been a tremendous asset to just add him back when you did, especially after the unfortunate season-ending injury to Buda Alukta. Just making a one-for-one swap there, as Ryan Walters and Jedd Fisch called it, is something where just to, wrap things up here with the theme of injuries, is something where it's still an unfortunate loss for sure, because Buda was playing really solid football before he went down, but having another just veteran senior leader linebacker type in Jacob Manu to be able to step in and just fill the role in the middle of the way that he has is really exciting. And I think Washington defense, especially with what we saw late in that game, it's this close. It is very close to figuring it out and taking that next step forward that you're really hoping to. And especially against some of the offenses, I want to exclude Illinois because they've done a really good job on that side of the ball so far this year. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for this defense to prove that they can play at a high level. And I'm really excited to see what that's going to look like. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And if you really like what we have to offer, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel through content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.